So we'll just have a look at the weaving of fabrics as something to add to your scroll. So what I've got here is the different ways you can approach this. So there's having a background piece of fabric. So here I've got the floral, and then the strips that I've woven on, I've left this gap between them so that you see the backing cloth, which can add interest here in the squares that are revealed. So that's the way to do it, of have a background fabric and do it in such a way that you also see it with the gaps between it. Here I actually just stitch down the center of the strips to hold them in place. You could just sort of stitch them at the edges if you didn't want to have it sort of held down. So that's one option. The other one here, so again, I've got a backing piece of cloth to stabilize it on, and I've used bias binding. So I pinned all the warp threads down onto the top of the backing cloth, and then the weft, which goes from left to right and right to left, I wove in afterwards. So again, I've just pinned this temporarily. So you could do it so that, like the other sample, you've got the gaps, or you push it right up so that the edges touch each other and actually you don't see any of the backing. That just sort of helps hold it in place. And then what you can do if you want to is just stitch around the edges of this so that these bits, it will hold tight because it will be sort of wedged in with the weaving, but it won't sort of be held down totally flat. So that's the other option, to push them right together. Then the other thing we looked at was actually slashing into the fabrics. So here I just cut into a piece of fabric and then sort of folded up every other one, laid down the bias binding, place that one down. All your strips of fabric, raw edges can look good as well. And now I'm going to lift up the alternative warp pieces and lay another piece down, lay that down, and then again lift up the opposite ones and lay that down. So doing it this way, again, you will have to sort of stitch it and anchor it either around the edges or all the way through it. And this means that you see the weaving on the front and the back. So if you were to do that in the scroll, as I've got here, what I did is, rather than slash all the way down to the bottom, I just did it sort of a few centimeters in from the edge of the scroll, slashed through, and then wove through some strips of fabric here. So on the back of the scroll, you see the weaving as well as on the front, and then I'll just have to sort of stitch it down to hold it. Or, like I said, have a go where you'll cut another piece of fabric to attach to your end of your scroll or your next piece, and you can then add the weaving on top of that. So on the back, you don't see the weaving. So again, I've just started with pinning those bits on. And again, you can sort of lift up and lay pieces on like this and fold it down, or just sort of weave it through as you go. And that's the other option there. And then you can play around, like I said, with stitching it all down, embroidering over the top. You could then add patches, Suffolk puffs, buttons. It's up to you to play around with.